afternoon to all the people who are joining us today. And today we have with us a very special guest, Mrs. Anima Patil-Sabale. And she is a software engineer and an aerospace engineer as well. And she's currently working as Orion Spacecraft Simulation Engineers at NASA Johnson Space Center, Houston. And she's also a Scientist-Astronaut Candidate. And most impressively, she is the 2017 Woman of Influence Award. So it's good to have you, ma'am, on board.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to interact with all of you. And yeah, let's get going. Thank you for inviting me.
Okay, so Anima, ma'am, all of our viewers are actually very interested to know about the passion and how and when you found your passion about space.
Okay, so the thing is, like many of you, right? I'm sure when we're kids, we are so fascinated by the stars, and it was the same case. I don't even remember what age it was when we would sleep on the terrace in the summers, and I would look at the stars. And at that time, I was growing up in the 80s, and we could see the arms of the galaxy as well. One of the arms, it would be in the sky, and so it was really fascinating to me. And I would always wonder what is out there, and I want to go up there and but I had no idea how I was going to do that. But I remember this that I would read up a lot about space launches. At that time, the US and the Russian space programs were at their peak, and I would see pictures in books. So there was a book exhibition when I was about 7 at our school, St. Joseph's Convent High School in Jalgaon. And in that book exhibition, I saw some pictures, some books with pictures of astronauts laying on their backs and launching into space. And that's when I got to know, oh, if you become an astronaut, you get to go to the stars. And since then, it has been a passion. That's when it took seed in my mind, in my heart, that if I want to become something, it's this. I want to become an astronaut. And since then, I've just even 7 was a very young age. At that time I did not know how I was going to go about doing that. But as I was growing, when I was in school, high school, middle school, at that time Rakesh Sharma ji launched, right, through the Russian space program, our first Indian astronaut. And then I thought he's a fighter pilot, so maybe I should become a fighter pilot like him, and then I'll get to go to space. And then even though the Indian Air Force was not accepting women as fighter pilots, I got the application. I decided I'm going to still apply, even though I'm not a male. But I had a slight myopia. I was short-sighted, right? Glasses, very minor number. So, and on the Air Force application to be a fighter pilot, you need to have a perfect 20/20 vision. At that time, that was the criteria. So I couldn't pursue that. So I ended up becoming a software engineer, did my master's in computer application at our local university, North Maharashtra University in Jalgaon, which was kind of new at that time. 30 seats. MCA was really special at that time. I ended up working for a couple of years in Mumbai, and then me and my husband got an opportunity to come to the US on H-1B visas as software consultants. While working here as a software engineer for about a few years, I was watching the space shuttles launch regularly. I had a 3-year-old. I had a full-time job, and that's when I decided, you know what, even though I'm already 30, I'm still going to try and pursue this dream. Let me see how far I can get. So I decided to do a second master's in aerospace engineering. I applied, I got into the program, and it was a bit of a struggle. Initially, it was difficult to get support from the family, and it was understandable. They thought I would not give proper attention to the family, to my son, I had a full-time job as well, right? So it was challenging, but we got through that time, and their support means a lot. At that time when I did not have the support, it was challenging. But now they've all seen how I stretch myself, I work really hard, I keep them as my priority, and so they've come to support me, and that's how I've gotten this far. So that's how it's been. While I was doing that, waiting after my master's in aerospace engineering, I was waiting to be a US citizen. I wanted to come work for NASA or Lockheed, one of the aerospace engineering companies. But you need to be a citizen to work in your aerospace in the US. So I wasn't a citizen. I had to wait for quite a long time. And then finally, when I was about to become a citizen, that's when I got a call for the Kepler mission. It was just one interview with a group of 10 to 12 people, engineers, scientists, and managers, and they really liked my aerospace and software background. and I was hired then and there. And since then, I've been doing talks about Kepler, and I've also started exploring what else can I do to build my astronautics skills. That's how I became a commander for the Hera mission. I got selected to be a commander for the Hera, which is Human Exploration and Research Analog at NASA's Johnson Space Center here in 2015. It was a 14-day mission, an analog simulation to an asteroid called the Geographos. So I got to be a commander. So that was an exciting experience as well. I got to, and it was a NASA analog, right? So we got to do everything that astronauts, similar to what astronauts do on the International Space Station, from eating the food that they eat, like dehydrated food. I had pictures and slides, but maybe some other time I can share those with you guys. But yeah, that was one experience. Then there was a simulated microgravity fluid loading study in which I was in a head down tilt position for about 8 hours on 2 different days. And it was, like I said, microgravity simulation study. We wanted to understand when astronauts come back, after the re-entry, during the re-entry, how the body gets affected. They get dehydrated, and how we could use salt tablets to work around that issue. That was one study. Then I got selected to be a Scientist-Astronaut Candidate for Project Possum. I found out about that. I trained for a week at Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University. After the training, I've been participating in microgravity research experiments testing the spacesuit for Final Frontier Design, which is a commercial company that has designed the spacesuit. And it's a tie-up between Possum and Final Frontier Design. So we fly parabolas to test the performance of their spacesuit. So these are the kind of things I've been doing. So your question was short. I think I gave a long answer. I covered a couple of your questions, I guess. But yeah, that's how excited I get when I start talking about how I've gotten this far. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, actually, I've answered two of my questions. Like, I was going to ask you about your work as well, but so by listening all your about your story, like I really feel like now I feel like there's some sort of similarity, like how your educational background has been and how mine is
Okay.
currently going on. Because even I am pursuing physics, and I have a plan. I have a dream to become a space traveler, maybe a
Okay.
Gaganaut or a cosmonaut or an
Awesome. Yeah,
astronaut.
yeah.
God knows. So
Yeah, I
yeah.
tried to be a Gaganaut, but they didn't pay heed
So
to me. I'm just kidding. I actually reached out to, what is her name? The ma'am who's leading the human spaceflight program. Lalitambika, ma'am? Yeah, yeah, yeah.
oh yeah. So
Yeah, so
I read
she's
about her.
heading
Yeah.
the human spaceflight research program at ISRO. So I did reach out to her office, but I got a reply from her office that it's challenging. If you put out applications, you can apply. But I was pretty sure, even when I was checking with them, that they are going to hire Indian Air Force test pilots. Their civilians had no chance in the first. They're not going to have a chance in the first few flights,
Yeah.
right? Because it makes sense. Look at NASA. Look at Russia. Everyone has launched test pilots because test pilots have that endurance, that strength, that power to be able to fly those spacecrafts that are brand new that have never been tested. So made sense. Yeah. Yeah. So all the best to you in the future as ISRO's manned
So,
spaceflight program grows and becomes stable. I think they will start hiring Gaganauts, and we will also have commercial spaceflight opportunities. So things are opening up. So keep at it.
I don't know if Indian Air Force would be accepted because I have myopia. But see, that's a short
But
number.
see, it's a
So let's do
correctable.
the test. And
It's a correctable problem. I had a LASIK surgery in 2004 when I decided I wanted to do this. And mine was a very small number. So that LASIK surgery corrected my problem. And look at me today. I forgot that I had ever had glasses. I could scuba dive, I could fly airplanes. So it's a big relief. And today, when I'm a human test subject also, in addition to my Orion Spacecraft Simulations Lab Manager role at NASA Johnson Space Center. As a volunteer, I am a test subject for the Human Research Program. So in that, what we have to do is go through a complete, thorough medical check, a medical exam, Air Force Type 3 medical exam, where they check your vision, your hearing, everything. So every time that exam happens, I know my vision is perfect 2020. So that's how far I've come. So myopia is not an issue. And even in NASA's astronaut application now, since a few years, NASA has mentioned that vision corrected up to a certain extent, they will accept candidates with that criteria as well. So yeah, things are changing. A lot of positives.
Okay, now thanks for all this guidance. I'll always keep them in mind. And now to the next
Mhm.
question that we have on our list. People actually really want to know about your inspiration. Like, who inspired you?
So see, in the beginning, there have been a lot of people along the way that have inspired me. Every time I meet someone, like even Sunita Williams, ma'am, I've got a chance to meet her a couple of times now that I've been at JSC. And she's inspired me as well. But if I go back in time, all the way to my childhood, I feel my parents have been my biggest inspiration. Both of them have come from big challenges, challenging backgrounds. My dad, he was one of three brothers. He was a middle one. Um, he had no mom since he was three, and I mean, he raised everything. He created everything out of a zero. He did not have anything that he could base things off of. So he started from scratch, from zero. In 1973, he started his coaching classes, okay, with just three students. Can you believe that? But he did not get discouraged. And by the time he retired, his coaching classes had become really popular. At that time, coaching classes were really kind of very something very special. They were not as rampant as we have them today, right? Everywhere you'll see hundreds of. They were very unique at that time, and so the way he coached his students, that was really special, and that's how his classes became really popular. And he went through a lot of hardships. Even after I was born, he married in 74. He married my mom in 74. When he married, she was just 19, and he told her the first thing, we don't have a woman in our house. I have my younger brother, I have my older brother, I have my dad, and then there are my sister's kids. You have to take care of everyone. Are you going to be able to manage that? Then we will get married. And that's how they get married. My mom agrees to that. And since 19, at the age of 19, she's taken care of this huge family all by herself, single-handedly. I was born, then my sister was born after a couple of years while raising us. And my dad decided to do his master's in Mumbai University. He got accepted when I was about 2 or 3 years old. So while he was away, she was managing, and he was working in Mumbai while he was studying as well as at Vivekananda classes. So I've seen them struggle, and while doing all that, they've maintained all relations with everyone in our larger family so well. People really respect them. So seeing that how from scratch, from zero, they both have brought this big kind of, it was like a little big, what do you say, I can't think of a word, but the challenge classes, that was the name. It how big it grew and how things turned out from living in a very small house to a big. That's been my inspiration. So whenever I feel defeated, whenever I feel low, I think my dad, my mom, they have been my rock support and inspiration. I think of all those times, the hardships. I've seen those when I was growing up, how they've come through those, and that's how whatever I am today. We all say that, right, to our parents, but they've instilled these cultural values in us also, these traditional cultural values in all three of us. And that's been my inspiration. And then along the way, like I said, while I was growing up, Rakesh Sharmaji was an example. Then when I came to the US, Kalpana Chawla ma'am, I watched her launch to on Columbia to the space station. And then it was a disaster watching her come back. And when everything fell apart, I was in tears. How can this happen? And so, but I was already following her journey, how she came to be an astronaut. And then there have been, what's her name? Astronaut Peggy Whitson, then Sunita Williams, ma'am. So several astronauts have been. I've had the fortune of meeting the Hubble Hugger. He calls himself the Hubble Hugger. He was one of the astronauts. At that time, he was the chief of the Science and Technology Directorate at NASA when I was working at NASA Ames. So yeah, I won't remember his name again, but yeah, these people have been my inspiration. How their journeys have been. Recently, during the International Women's Day, I was fortunate enough to get to watch Sunita Williams' ma'am's presentation, her slides from when she was little. So I bet you guys will be jealous of me. I got to watch her as a kid, how she was a soccer player, and then how when she joined the Navy, her pictures from that time. I have pictures. I've taken pictures of her slides, so I will share them sometime on my page. But yeah, these people have been my inspiration.
Okay, ma'am. So it's really getting. I wish the webinar is going really good. I'm really enjoying whatever you're saying,
Thank you.
and let's just we'll just go for the next
Mhm.
question. The questions is what are the requirements and the test one needs to go through to become an astronaut?
So the requirements are you need to have, see, there are several nations who have space programs, right? And human spaceflight programs, a few of them have human spaceflight program. India's is quite new. So every nation has its own selection criteria. If you look at the NASA program in the beginning during the Apollo era, NASA was hiring test pilots as well for the similar reasons that I spoke about earlier. But over a period of time, NASA started accepting civilians. So almost half of NASA's astronaut corps is from the military background and half of them from the civilian background. So if you are not into the military, if you are at a stage and age where you feel you might be able to join. I looked into joining the Air Force after I came here. I was too old to join the Air Force. There is a cutoff for 30 years. You have to be only until 30 or 34 years you can apply to the to the US Air Force. So look into that. I always, and it's not that just because I wanted to become an astronaut, I wanted to do that. That's one thing I want to suggest to everyone. Don't do something just because it will qualify you. You should be able to enjoy it. I have always been someone who loved the disciplined background, um, a disciplined life. And that's how I even joined the NCC. Is NCC still around? I think it is, right? The National Cadet Corps. When I was doing my bachelor's, so I joined the NCC because I thought that would help me get disciplined and have a nice life where I can make myself physically strong as well, right? So yeah, that was what I always wanted to do. So I looked into joining the Air Force. It didn't work out for me, but that's one thing. If you are a civilian and you still want to pursue this path, I would suggest getting a degree in science, technology, engineering, or math, one of the STEM fields. Because if you look at the NASA application, I'm going to talk about the NASA astronaut program because that's the one I'm more familiar with. If you look at that, the criteria is first thing is you need to be a US citizen. Second thing is you need to have a degree, a master's degree now. Until the last astronaut application, NASA would accept people with bachelor's degrees as well. But this time when we applied in March, they've changed the criteria. You have to be a master's with a degree in the STEM, one of the STEM fields. So yeah, that is one criteria. And after that, you need to be able to pass long duration physical exams. So right now we are planning to go to Moon and Mars, right? The space station is built. At that time, NASA had different criteria because we were hiring mission specialists and payload specialists. Now we want people who will be traveling to Moon and Mars, so they will need some different sets of qualifications. So that's one criteria. You need to be able to physically be strong and pass those medical exams and the long duration physical. So keep yourself physically fit. It's a very good addition to your application, and your chances improve, right? If you're physically really fit. Other thing is acquire skills like scuba certification, scuba diving, flying, train to be a pilot. These are all good skills. You can see how they can relate, right? Astronauts train in the neutral buoyancy lab here at in Houston, and they are in their spacesuit. There is a neutral buoyancy lab is a 40 feet deep swimming pool in which there is a mock-up of the International Space Station, and astronauts suit up, dive under the water, and train for their spacewalks on that mock-up. So if you have scuba skills, then it helps you while you're into that training mode. So these are the kind of skills you can acquire. Other thing is there are programs like Project Possum now that you mentioned about earlier. So Project Possum trains you to handle yourselves in hypoxia. When there is decompression in a spacecraft or an aircraft, how do you recognize the symptoms of lack of oxygen? Hypoxia is basically deprivation of oxygen. So once you start losing oxygen at a very slow rate, it's really difficult to recognize that you're losing oxygen from the spacecraft or the aircraft. So you're trained to understand what are the symptoms so that you can, if you're in that kind of a situation, you can save yourself and the crew and any passengers you have on board. So that's one of the trainings. Then we are trained to handle G's, high G's, zero G. Both of them have different effects on your body. So those kind of trainings help as well. But remember, you have to finance yourself for these kind of trainings. So if you have a good stable job, then you will be able to pay for such trainings and then participate in the research missions. But bottom line, everything, you acquire all these skills. Bottom line is becoming an astronaut is a challenging thing, right? Just recently, 12,000 people have applied when NASA's astronaut applications closed. 12,000. Last time it was 18,600. I think because NASA put the master's criteria, it came down to 12,000. And out of those 12,000 also, we don't know how many are actually qualified to apply. We will find out later. But I'm one of those 12,000 applicants. So I know my chance is 0.0001. How many zeros you want to add before, I don't know. But it's very, very small, right? 0.001%, the probability for every one of us, no matter how highly qualified we are. So it's a challenging thing. There are very few spots and there is a big competition. So what do you do if you don't get selected? Astronauts, there have been astronauts who have applied multiple times, 3 times, 4 times, then they've gotten selected. So the key is not giving up. And then while you're pursuing this, having a career, a job that you will enjoy going to, working in every single day. So that is really important. You do all this, but while you're doing that, have a job, a career, choose something that you will really enjoy. You will really get excited to go to work every day. I am at Johnson Space Center now. I'm managing this Orion Spacecraft Simulations Lab. I'm really enjoying being here. I look forward to working every day. So that's how your career should be. It shouldn't be something that you picked up because you wanted to become an astronaut, but then you're stuck with it now because you didn't make it there, but you're stuck with your job. Don't do that. So find something really exciting and keep building your skills. Never think, I'm too old now, I can never do it. Look at me, I should give up, right? If you think like that, oh, I'm too old now, I should not do this. No, it's not like that. It's never too late. You're never too old. If you maintain yourself, you have to work hard, okay? You have to work really hard. It's not an easy thing to do. You need a lot of patience. You need a lot of persistence. This is an out-of-the-world dream. So you'll have to have a path, a career path that is out of the world also, right? It's not an ordinary career path. So think about all these things. And are you ready for the challenge? Think about it. You will have a lot of disappointments. What will you do then? Things will not work out your way. For me, it has been like that throughout my journey. Every step of the way, I've faced a lot of hurdles. Several times I should have even given up. My friends even asked me, why are you doing this? Why are you slogging so much? You have everything. Why do you want to do this? So that's how things will be. Things might not work in your favor. But the key is, for something like this, you need to have persistence. You need to have a lot of patience. And you need to believe that you can do it. Only then get into this and have a career that you will always enjoy being in. I hope I answered that question. I said that enough times. Your
Man, with
turn.
every question being answered, I feel like my chances of becoming a space traveler is just
Yeah.
increasing. So, I've seen in movies many times, like they say, like the NASA officials, what they show in the movie, usually what they say is you just have to be the best in your field of expertise or the interest whatsoever. So,
Yeah.
is it true? Like this is what NASA seeks?
Yes. So if you are an engineer, be the best engineer there can be. If you are a doctor, be the best doctor. So yes, be really good at what you do, and then you acquire all these skills. That's what they mean by that, and that's true. The more experience you have, the more skills you have in what you do. So if you're an engineer, don't be content. Okay, now I have this job I always wanted, so now I'm content. No, don't be content. For example, I'm always looking for opportunities. What else can I do? Where else can I help? I'm managing this lab, but that's what because of this curiosity, what else I can do? I have the bandwidth. I will be able to finish this and then I have more time. So what else can I do? I go talk to my supervisors, and that's how I got to work on the spacesuit, the XCMU spacesuit, for the last 10 months. I was working on that while I was also managing so I was working on two projects simultaneously. And that's what I would like to say, that never stop being curious, never stop looking for opportunities. How else can you contribute? What more can you do? Because while you're doing that, you build more skills. I never knew a lot about spacesuits. I've flown in the Final Frontier design spacesuits. I know about those. Those are IVA spacesuits. But NASA's new spacesuit, the XCMU spacesuit, is something else, right? It's an EVA spacesuit. We are developing a spacesuit after so many years. That was the one from the 80s when we were putting the space station together. It's an old spacesuit. We can't use that spacesuit on the moon and Mars. We can't expect our astronauts to do their EVAs on the moon and Mars in this old spacesuit. So we need a new one. So it was fun to learn a lot of things about the new spacesuit, how things work at NASA, just in general, when we are designing something, be it a spacesuit or be it a spacecraft, or what all goes on in the background. I got to learn about that. So be curious, and you're right, like the NASA selection officials, astronaut selection program officials say, be the best at what you do. Because when we apply, like you're going to be in a pool of thousands of engineers if you're an engineer. If you're going to be in a pool of few hundred doctors, engineers are the ones who apply the most. So we have the biggest competition. But yeah, being the best then helps you stand out, right? That is why that's really important. So become an expert at what you do and then acquire all other skills. Good question.
Okay, so ma'am, like few days back, I was watching this masterclass series by Chris Hadfield. So in that, sir, Chris Hadfield he says that astronauts really don't like adrenaline in their veins. So, like, if you could just put some light on it.
What series was it you said?
So, sir, Chris Hadfield he says that
Oh, okay.
astronauts really don't like veins in their adrenaline in their
Adrenaline.
veins.
Hmm. Okay. I'm not familiar with that. I'll have to go back and look at that. But was he saying it on really seriously, or was he kidding about it? He was serious about
No,
it.
like what he was trying to, he was just trying to say that a, a person who is on a space flight, he shouldn't be all the time like so excited and
Excited. Yeah, that's
hyper
true.
about things and all these things. Yeah.
Yeah, that's true, because you need to
Okay.
be calm to be able to handle challenging situations, right? Space flight is such a field where if you're traveling to moon or Mars, something unexpected can happen anytime, because you're traveling in a spacecraft, which is a machine, and no matter how much of testing you've done, there are situations, there are circumstances that can occur when you're traveling in space, that you never expected. You prepare for things, but things might happen that you never expect. So how do you handle those? How in those kind of challenging situations, you need to be calm, focused on being able to handle those. So yes, it is good to be excited, but you need to adapt to every situation. That's what he means. Yes, space flight is exciting, and until you get there, right, you're always going to be excited about it. But once you're in it, then you train for 2 years. Astronauts train for 2 years before they're astronaut candidates, until they finish their training, and then they become NASA astronauts. Until then, they're ASCANs. We call them ASCANs. So I think that training period is what trains you how to not only be physically strong, but even mentally strong. So being mentally strong is important. You get excited when you need that excitement. You calm down. You stay focused when you need to do that, right? And yeah, that's important as well. So being mentally strong is key for space flight exploration.
Okay. So there's this next question, which is about the matter of perfection and patience.
Mhm.
The statement is space is a matter of patience and perfection. How do you justify it?
Well, my entire life has been an example, right? I have been really patient and persistent, and that's how I've come this far. Like I said, there have been instances. I'll give you an example of when I was training to be a pilot, when I started my flight lessons. At that time, I had two young kids, the older one and the younger one was just like a year old. So when I started that, and then I was taking flying lessons is an expensive thing. It costs a lot of money. So I was saving some money and then I was putting it, and then I was taking lessons only on the weekends. I couldn't fly regularly like full-time students. I could fly only on the weekends after my work and just take a couple of hours from the weekend and then go take my lessons. So when I was training and I was almost towards the end of my stage two, the school where I was flying that shut down. There was a new owner. He took everyone's money and he flew out of the country. So we lost all our savings. I lost all my savings. So I had to take a break of a couple of years because I had to save again, and I had to find a new school. That school was really good. It was closer to my home. It worked out perfect. But this kind of a thing happened. Then I went back after a couple of years, found another school, but it was really far. I took some lessons there. Then I gave up. I came back here and I looked for another school. So I found a third school, which was closer. And then I started with instructors. I had to switch between three instructors because their schedules wouldn't work with mine. Finally, on the fourth instructor, I settled. I was training in the Cessna 152, the smallest and simplest aircraft to train in. And I did my solo 25 nautical miles solo. I was about to plan for my 50 nautical miles solo. But at that time, there was only one Cessna 152 in the flight school. They sold it. So I lost one aircraft that I had that I was training in, and I was planning on finishing it. Now there were 172s, so I had to retrain on the 172. It's not like they'll allow you to continue from there, right? And every time you start training, you have to go back and start from scratch again. You have to show the new instructor what all you're doing. So 172, I start training, and I did 3 solo touchdowns and takeoffs. So I reached that stage, and now I was planning for the cross country, and that's when I got the opportunity to come to Houston for this new job. And so again, that thing fell behind. So it has been full of hiccups. My entire journey, my flying. I always say all the elements are against me getting my private pilot's license. So that's how it is. But keeping that patience and that persistence. Now my written exam has expired, so I have to do that again. So but I don't want to give up. I want to keep at it. So it sometimes just be patient and be persistent and do that. That's how astronauts train as well, right? They have a lot of patience. If you look at them, they train for these 2 years. Then when they are on their missions, imagine you have a mission after this 2 year of training and you become an astronaut, but you have to wait for your turn to fly. And when you're assigned a mission, you have to train for that mission again for all the spacewalks they'll be doing. So the mission specific training takes more time as well. So imagine the amount of patience they need to have. So that's what I say also. I find that it's challenging for today's generation to have that patience when someone asks me a question and I don't respond to that right away because I'm at work and I saw their question. I think, okay, I'll get back to them in the evening. Then they'll be, I've gotten responses, right? Do you have hands? Can you type? So that's what upsets me a little. What's wrong with you guys? Be patient. We'll get back to you. Just need that time. So this is a field where you need to have a lot of patience. You need to have a lot of persistence, and you need to have a lot of perfection as well. Whatever you do, the good quality of work is really important as well. Finish it with a good quality. So yeah, that's all. They pay off in a long run, all these 3 P's.
Okay, Anima, so there is an interesting question I have here on the list.
Okay.
So there are 2 scenarios. Either you get a successful return from ISS or you get a one-way trip to Mars. Which one of these would you choose and why?
So see, being a positive person and optimist, I will always think the Mars trip is never going to be a one-way trip, especially when NASA is planning something. And if I'm going to be a NASA astronaut, I'm pretty sure NASA will always plan on bringing the astronauts back unless something goes wrong. And I end up dying there, which will be a really very slim chance of something like that happening, because like I said, NASA trains the astronauts and tests out its spacecrafts and all kind of technologies really thoroughly. And that is why we are actually setting up a base on the moon first, right? The Artemis missions, we are going to the moon and then we'll be going to Mars. Why are we doing that? Because moon is our test bed. It's closer to us. We can go there and come back in just a few days, and we'll be able to test our technologies out there. We are testing things here, we are testing things on the space station, but we need something out there. Even the space station is still in the protection of our Van Allen magnetic field, right? The magnetosphere. But we need something where we can test that's beyond that. No protection from the cosmic and galactic radiation, and in the extreme of the space environment. So the moon is our perfect place to do that. And if something goes wrong, if our astronauts get in some danger, we can help them out, right? It's compared to how far Mars is. So with the Artemis missions, that's what NASA is trying to do. But from my perspective, the space station is built. I don't know if NASA plans to send the Artemis generation astronauts to the space station. We have seen a few astronauts, the newer ones, traveling to the space station. Christina Koch, for her almost year-long mission, right? She was on the space station, she got back. Jessica Meir. So NASA might send astronauts to the space station for training purposes or for some research purposes, and then to the moon and Mars. But that's not clear right now. So I don't mind going to the space station also, but my plan is to go to Mars and start helping us humans settle on Mars. So yeah, one other thing that's important is this is a field where you know that there's a lot of uncertainty, right? So no fear of death is really important. Being fearless, not even thinking about it, because you're doing something that is unique, that is going to contribute to the future of human space flight in deep space, long duration deep space exploration. So yeah, I don't think about all that. The only fear I've ever had was of deep water, which I overcame when I took my scuba lessons. So yeah, Mars is where I would like to go first. Good question. I don't know how I answered that.
Um, yeah, actually, people who are joining us right now, they're actually enjoying your answers a lot. I guess we have. I'm seeing here on the live chat, we're getting a lots of comments
Yeah,
here.
I got one.
So there's this interesting question by Ishant.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, this question is by Ishant Savaya. He asks, in the Martian movie, Mark Watney says that NASA hates fire. What countermeasures they take for that?
So we try to avoid everything that can start a fire. What countermeasures on the space station? You know, right? We do a lot of maintenance of the space station. Also, that's one of the jobs of the astronauts. So prevention is the best measure, right? So you make sure your systems are functioning smooth. I can give you an example. Like Glenn is asking another question related to a Martian trip. So I can gel these two questions together. To give you an example, the the Hera mission, when we did the analog, in the analog, one of our tasks was to take care of our spacecraft. It was a habitat here at Johnson Space Center that we were in, but we were pretending that's our spacecraft, right? In the analog mission, with which we are traveling to Geographos, the asteroid. So taking care of the systems inside the spacecraft was one of our tasks. It was assigned to us on our task schedules. And that involved making sure those CO2 scrubbers, they are in good condition, taking them out, examining them manually. So these are the kind of tests we do. And we will have systems. Now things are getting automated. Even Orion is going to be fully automated spacecraft. So we are going to have automated systems that will trigger alerts if something goes wrong. So these are the kind of precautions we take. We do systems maintenance to make sure everything is functioning smoothly, and we catch any issues if there are. If there are any cables that have worn out over a period of time and that might have a risk of starting a fire, we make sure we remove that and we replace it. So these are the kind of measures we take. And can I answer Glenn's question? Curious of what your feelings are regarding a Martian trip, specifically the 2.5-year minimum duration. And is NASA doing anything to prepare astronauts? Yes, Glenn, actually we are, and that this is in my slides. But what we are doing is, so traveling to Mars is really challenging. We all know the human body is not designed for deep space missions, right? Or just living in space also. It's not, it's designed to live in this nice, comfortable, protected environment of the Earth. But as we are planning to go to Moon and Mars, we're trying to figure out what are the challenges. The Moon missions have been short duration. You're right, the Mars mission is going to be 2.5 years. We need to not only travel there, which takes about 6 to 7 months each way. That's one whole year just in traveling. 1 year of stay at least on the surface. So we've gone this far, so we want to do some research. And then we also have to wait for that window when Mars and Earth align next to each other, so that the travel time is shorter, right? Which happens every 2 years. So it is going to be a minimum of 2.5 to 3-year mission. Here itself, when we send astronauts to the space station, we see a lot of effects on the physiology, right? Physical effects. Because of all that body fluids rushing up because of the zero gravity, there is a lot of pressure on their brain, the intracranial pressure, we call it, the intracranial pressure. There is pressure on the eyes. Astronauts lose a vision up to a certain extent, even if when they're up there only for 6 months. So of course that vision adjusts back when they come back to the gravity of Earth, but it's not fully restored. Okay, so that's going to be one challenge. This happens in 6 months. What will happen in 2 to 3 years on Mars? Then the second challenge is they lose a lot of bone and muscle. So in 6 to 7 months, they're losing a lot of bone and muscle. How will that happen? What will happen in 2 to 3 years? So we need to figure out solutions. There are physiological effects, but there are also psychological effects. Like you're going to be in a confined environment. You won't be able to step out. We take our air on the Earth for granted. We take the gravity for granted. But when you are going to be traveling to Moon and Mars, and these are going to be challenges, because we're going to be in a locked environment. The recycled air is not going to be fun to breathe all the time. And then the food, it's going to be not hot and fresh cooked food, right? We will have to live with, until we start cooking on Mars, we'll have to live with dehydrated food. So these are the kind of challenges, that psychological challenge, they start having effect on your minds. When you are in analogs, we start to notice that after a couple of days, there is a lot of excitement in the first few days. But then as things start to become routine, the routine tasks can get monotonous as well. That affects your performance. So for studying the psychological challenges, we have analog missions here, like the HERA, Human Exploration Research Analog here, the High Seas, which is in Hawaii. It's on a volcano in Hawaii. And High Seas was running long duration missions, like 4 months, 8 months, until fire tragedy happened there a year or two ago. I think they'll be starting up again. But then there's Mars Desert Research Station, one in Utah. I was a commander for one of those missions in 2018. So there are some in Arctic and Antarctic stations as well. So we are running these analogs to understand if we keep people locked, astronauts locked in the analog astronauts locked in those habitats, how does it affect their psychology? In HERA, we had a lot of studies going on. We had to take surveys. We had to be a part of cognitive studies. We were even put in a situation for 40 hours where we were not allowed to sleep or eat anything, because we were in an asteroid storm. If we slept, we were going to die. So we had to navigate our spacecraft through that asteroid storm. So we were given tons of tasks. Imagine no food, no sleep for 40 hours. They wanted to see how that affects our performance, and it starts affecting your body gradually. So you need to train for that as well. So yeah, these are the kind of analogs we're doing here. And for physical effects, we have to be in the extreme environment of space to do those studies. So we've been sending astronauts, like Scott Kelly had almost a year on the space station, right? Mikhail Kornienko and Scott Kelly, they had a year-long mission in 2015. And just recently, Christina Koch went up there for a year. We have one more astronaut. I don't remember if it's Andrew Morgan or someone else who launched just now, who is going to be on the space station for a year also. So we cannot send a lot of astronauts in space for these kind of studies. How long duration in extreme environment of space is going to affect their bodies, because it's funding issue as well to send a lot of people up there. But it's not possible right now. So we are sending a few astronauts at a time. First we had Scott Kelly. That was our one data point. Now we sent Christina Koch. So we're trying to get more data by putting several astronauts up there for long durations of time. It will happen over a period of time. But yeah, these are the kind of things we are doing. And I think these, and now with the moon mission, we will have another test bed to have our astronauts on the surface of the moon and figure out how we can set up habitats, test out our technologies, the rovers that we're planning on using, water recycling systems, water generation and recycling systems. These technologies will be tested out on the moon. So by the time we go to Mars, we will be kind of prepared compared to how much prepared we are today, right? So we'll be better prepared at that point, and that's how we need to take it in stages. We can't directly go to Mars today. We'll be putting our astronauts in a lot of danger by doing that, risking their lives basically. Okay, that was a long answer, but hope it makes sense.
Well, I must say that today the viewers are really they are interested into the talk. They have been asking a lot of questions. But
Mhm.
I just got a question about the space food when you were telling about it. Like I know like the concept of dehydrated food, how the space food is actually dehydrated. But in terms of taste and the nutrition, how does the space food differs from the food what we have on Earth?
So see, when in Hera, we tried that food, right? And going into Hera, we thought, okay, we are going to come out really skinny because we won't be, I mean, fed enough. It's all dehydrated food. But that was not the case actually. The food, that was our first time. The food was completely dehydrated in plastic bags. We had to inject water into it. If it was something like a rice or a curry, we had to inject hot water. If it was breakfast cereal, we had to inject cold water. So yeah, it was NASA has a space food lab where they try out all these space foods, and I actually participate in those studies also. You can go and sample and give them your feedback how it tastes. So I do that at the space food lab here at JSC. So the food has been tasty. There's a lot of variety they have as well, but it's good. It's tasty. It's nutritious. It keeps you full. The only challenge is it's not fresh. And for 6 months you can manage, but if it's a 2 to 3 year mission, how are you going to manage on the same kind of food? It will get boring after a time, right? You want to have something different. So that's another challenge. What was the question again? Can you repeat it? I'm sorry, I got distracted. Oh yeah, the taste, right? So I would say it's somewhat similar, not exactly similar to that because it's still wet and like real food, right? But the thing is, you lose your sense of smell and taste when you're up in space. Because, like, remember when you're in zero gravity, I said the body fluids are rushing to your brain and it's squishing, all the fluids are accumulated here. The astronauts' faces get really puffy. Their legs get skinny because they are losing bone and muscle and all the fluids have come up, but their faces get puffy. That's called the chicken leg syndrome. So, because of the body fluids being all accumulated here, they lose their sense of smell and sense of taste. So it's like when you have a cold, you can't taste any food, right? I mean, you can't feel the taste of any food. That's what happens to them. So they take up sauces with them, hot spices, sauces, to add flavor to their foods, because that's what will help them feel some taste at least. So that's one of the challenges. And so it's completely different, and there is research. That is why we have the space food lab on how we can make food better for astronauts for long duration missions especially. Recently there was a challenge at NASA. It was to find out what kind of foods should we send with our first two astronauts that we are sending back to the moon, and the first woman and the next man on the moon. So there were a lot of suggestions. We need to keep them well fed. So space food, the challenge is you're not going to be able to make fresh food all the time. You're going to have this dehydrated food, at least for the initial missions, right? Until we set up a green hab on Mars, on Moon, and we start growing our own food and then experiment with cooking on Moon and Mars. Until then, we are going to have pre-packaged food that we will be sending there. So that pre-packaged food needs to meet their daily calorie count, plus how much protein, how much of all the vitamins they need. So that's how power packed that one. It might be one bag of food, but it needs to be packed with all those nutritional elements and to keep them full as well, to give them that taste as well. So it's a challenge, and things are being worked out on what can we do, what can we give them the best that they can we also need to be considerate of the amount of payload we can carry, right? The payload is distributed. This is how much food you can carry, this is how much water you will need to carry. So considering all these factors, creating the best food for astronauts to take to Moon and Mars is a research area as well. And if it's one of your areas, one of you should take it up as a research.
Yeah. There is this question that is, I guess, mainly focusing on the career guidance. This question is by Ishant Savaya. He asks, I really want to be an astronaut, but also interested in astrophysics. How should I pursue my career forwards?
So, Ishan, I have a website, animapatil-sabale.com, where I've answered a question just like this one. If your astrophysics is your area of interest, you should, I don't know if you've done a bachelor's already, you should look to do a master's in astrophysics, and if possible, a PhD in astrophysics, astronomy as well. I worked on the Kepler mission, so I know a little bit about this. But we had a lot of astrophysicists and astronomers working on the Kepler mission with us. We were processing all this data coming from Kepler, and we were providing it to them. And they were looking through the data to find out if there are Earth-like planets around Sun-like stars in our galaxy. So it's a very interesting field, and you should definitely pursue it. I think I know of one astronaut at least who has a background in astrophysics. So it's definitely one of the STEM fields, right? So go for it. Make a career in astrophysics and then pursue your aspiration to become an astronaut as well.
Okay. So I hope, Ishant, your question was very well answered. And here we have few questions by Ravneet Kaur as well. Our first question is, what is the scope of flexible one-size-fits-all spacesuits?
One size fits all. I don't think, because the humans are all, they come in all different sizes, right? We have women who are short, and then there are men who are tall. Like recently, I'm sure you all must have read about the challenge of the first all-female spacewalk that Christina Cook and what's her name? I keep forgetting names when I'm doing the talks. There were two of the astronauts, female astronauts, who were going to do the first female spacewalk, but turned out one of the spacesuits was too large for them. So I was trying to think of her name. But yeah, so they couldn't do that. And that was a challenge, because these spacesuits were designed for males, nothing for the females. So the females have had a lot of struggle. Our women astronauts have had to struggle when they train in the neutral buoyancy lab as well. Already, as is, this spacesuit is really old, like I mentioned, right? Astronauts get bruises. They're not very flexible. So they get bruises on their knuckles, on their elbows as well when they're doing the spacewalks, because there's not enough flexibility. And then there's a size issue. So I read an interview where Christina Koch said how challenging it was to be in that spacesuit, where it's too big for you, and then you have to train in that while in the NBL, in the neutral buoyancy lab, and then you have to do a spacewalk in that kind of. So I hats off to them. I just imagine how challenging it is, and I can only imagine how they do their spacewalks so efficiently for 5 to 6 to 7 hours at a stretch. And our Final Frontier design spacesuits are examples as well. We've been testing in them, right? The research flights have been testing. So we find out when we are flying, we're testing the performance. We run into issues, and when after the flights are done in the post-flight debriefs, we share as test subjects, we share what our experiences were to make the spacesuits better. So that's what we are trying to do now with the XCMU. So all the lessons from the Apollo era spacesuits, from the space station, the EMU on the space station right now, all the lessons we've learned, we are applying those to this. But yes, there is not going to be a one size fits all, even if it's a biosuit like the Martian. If we come up with a biosuit, it will have to be a little flexible, right? To there will have to be one for one size, and but doesn't mean that we need to have a whole range or one specific suit designed for one specific astronaut. We can have that flexibility somewhere. But yeah, I don't think one because we are all different sizes, basically.
Yeah. So this next question is again from Ravneet Kaur. She asks, "What is your take on analog space mission astronauts? And do you think something like this is required in India as ISRO is moving towards human space flights?"
So yeah, analogs are helping us prepare for deep space missions. Now for ISRO, we are still it's going to be our first human space flight. We are in the nascent stages, right? We have a long way to go before we start planning flights. We need to first keep flying up to the lower Earth orbit at least, and then we'll be able to plan. But I think it's a good time. I have myself have I have this idea. I have had this idea in the back of my head. I want to come and implement it in India, but my work and my family responsibilities, I don't think I can do it until I retire. But I've been wanting to set up an analog in India because I feel from my experience with analogs, and I just finished a third master's in December in space studies, and as a part of that, there was one course where I got to learn about closed loop ecological systems, how we can design those. And I felt when I was studying for that course, India is the best place to set up an analog as well. Like we've won in Hawaii, we have won in Arctic and Antarctic, but India is a good place to set up one. And so I've looked into that. It will be a good idea to set up an analog. I wanted to set up an analog, and I also wanted to provide opportunities for students who are studying for their masters to work in this habitat that I want to set up. And for their projects, we can have mini projects where the students contribute to that project. So yeah, if Star wants to do it, so this is a challenge for you, Sunny. If Star wants to do it, we can collaborate. I can be the brains behind this, and you can help me implement this in India. But it will be a good idea. It will help not only ISRO, but and see all analog missions in general. All the space organizations can benefit from them because the data that comes out from that research will be helpful to anyone for their deep space missions, right? And NASA is really collaborative as well. We share a lot of data. Right now we have NASA and Roscosmos. They're collaborating on the Sirius missions. I don't know if you guys have heard about it. It's in Russia, and they are also long duration missions. So just like Hera, but a long duration version of Hera. At Hera, we did 14-day missions, then we did 30-day missions. Now we are doing 45-day missions. Several of them have been going on the 45-day missions. But at Roscosmos, where we have the Sirius habitat, it's going to be for the moon, studies for long duration moon missions. And they're going to be 4 months, 6 months, 8 months. So they're going to be really long duration missions, just like High Seas was. So yeah, good question. It will definitely help. I don't know what ISRO's goals are for long duration deep space missions, but I really feel that we are still in nascent stages at ISRO, but it's not going to harm. In the long run, it will help all the space organizations in general while we plan for deep space missions.
Okay, so there are actually a lot of questions that are actually focused on career focused questions.
Mm-hmm.
This question is from Vanishri R. For a BTech student, what are the various programs one could take up for masters in space and engineering field?
For BTech specifically, I don't know, but in general, I can say after your bachelor's, it doesn't matter. You don't have to do an MTech or some, I don't know what goes after a BTech in India, but I'm telling you, I'm sharing from a general perspective. I had a bachelor's in physics and I did a master's in computer applications, right? After that, I did my master's in aerospace engineering. So I had no background whatsoever from aerospace engineering, right? So there was a condition that I need to fulfill some basic requirements. So there were about 6 courses I had to take extra to get that aerospace engineering background, to familiarize myself with that background. So that stretched out when I could complete my master's, but I didn't mind because it gave me a good foundation, right? So just pick up a master's that in a field that really interests you, excites you, and be ready to work extra. Basically, if you really are passionate about that field, then just be willing to work a little extra, take a few more courses, just so you develop that baseline, that the background to become a master's in that field, right? So yeah, pick up. I would suggest, what was the name? I don't remember. I don't recall now. But see, I'm so bad at names. I would suggest just get a master's in a field that you love, and just be willing to work hard. Even if you don't have that background, just be willing to work a little extra.
It says, hello, ma'am. I'm enjoying this
Uh-huh.
webinar very much. I just wanted to know how leadership
Thank you.
skills important for an astronaut.
Yes, they are definitely. So, see, being an astronaut, what's most important is you need to be a leader when there is an opportunity to be a leader, and you need to be a follower when the situation demands so, right? So that was one of the areas I had taken up as research as well when I did this master's in space studies recently. Leadership and followership approach if you're being an astronaut. It's always good to have leadership skills. If you look at most of our astronauts, they all have those leadership skills. So but they also know when to become a follower if the situation demands so. So that's very important, and I think I'll sum it up in that, because there's a lot I can go on talking about.
Okay,
But
and
yeah, sorry to interrupt. One important
yeah,
thing. Yes, you can be a leader, but you can't, if there are responsibilities assigned to you, right? You have assigned responsibilities to your teammates. So be respectful of that. Don't try to step on each other's toes. So that is balancing that. That's when I say leadership and followership, balancing and knowing when to balance that out is really important. And humility is the biggest thing astronauts have today. Every time I meet an astronaut here at JSC, they're really humble. I met astronaut Rajachari. He is an Indian Air Force pilot, and I got to meet him a couple of times, and he's really very down to earth. Sunita Williams, ma'am, any astronaut that I meet, they're really very humble, very down to earth. You will never feel that you're meeting an astronaut. So grounded, and that's a very important characteristic that we need to develop, right? No matter where you reach, be humble. Humility is a trait that will really help you if you become an astronaut in the long run. Because when you're out there away from your loved ones, working on a mission, you need to get along with each other. It really helps you get along, avoid conflicts.
yeah. So actually, we are still getting a lot of questions, but due to time constraints, we have to actually end this webinar. But just one last question, ma'am. A
Mhm.
message for all the aspiring space pioneers and students. What would you say?
So I think I already shared this message, and I'll repeat it. Yes, becoming an astronaut is a challenging dream you set for yourself. It's like I call it in my presentation, um, something impossible that we're trying to make possible, right? Deep space dreams, making the impossible possible. So it's similar to that. It's something really challenging. The chances are really slim. So choose a career, choose a field that you want to become an expert in, that you will enjoy working in every day. Have big dreams, but be ready to work really hard for towards your dream. Be ready to be patient, wait for years together, and be persistent. Don't give up, no matter how many hurdles you face. Be really persistent and never ever give up. And I wish you all the best. And let's keep aiming upwards and onwards. Thank you for this session, and thank you for your time. Good questions. If you still have questions, you can reach out to me on my public page, and I will answer as and when I get an opportunity.
Thanks a lot, ma'am, for joining in and sharing your precious time with us. And thanks a lot to all the interesting audience as well. You guys put up a really good show, or help us put up a really good show out here. And for our listeners and the viewers who are with us right now, I love you guys to know that in the upcoming time, we are this entire the next three webinars are focused on the girls in space thing. So the next webinar will be on 29th April, 9 p.m. Indian Standard Time with Annie Cohen, who is a Firefly aerospace engineer. And the next details for the webinars will be shared very soon on Space Technology and Aeronautical Rocketry page. So stay connected, stay tuned, stay space is for everyone. Thank you guys. Thank you, ma'am.
Wish you all the best. Thank you. See you all.